Hallo und danke, dass Sie sich From Here von Christina Antonakos-Wallace angesehen haben. Ich bin Camilla Zari und arbeite für die Jugendprogrammierung des Luxemburg City Film Festival. Wir freuen uns riesig darüber, dass wir euch den Film zeigen konnten und auch, dass wir ein Gespräch mit der Regisseurin organisieren konnten, damit sie uns ein bisschen über die Entstehung des Films erzählen kann. Christina, willkommen, welcome. I'm really happy to have you here. So my first question would be, the documentary follows protagonists over some years, and we are following them into different periods of their life, and the documentary shows their evolution and their difficulties. And I was wondering, why did you choose especially activists and artists in their 20s and in their 30s, and why this period of time?
Thank you, Camille, for the question and for the invitation to be with everyone. I wish we could all be there in person, but I'm glad to have ways to continue to connect. The question is, why did I choose activists and artists and young people in their 20s moving into their 30s? And they were all in their 20s when we started filming and in their 30s by the time we finished filming. So when I started working on the project, I actually was not clear that I was really only looking for activists and artists. I was interested in young people who were either second generation or 1.5 generation, people who had grown up in either Germany or the US, but had not really made the choice about whether their family would migrate or not. So this decision was sort of out of their hands, and they were home in Berlin or New York, but experienced the boundaries of belonging and citizenship in their daily lives. And I was really looking for people who were pushing and questioning boundaries. I was really looking for people who could illuminate the boundaries by questioning them, if that makes sense. And so even though at first I talked to all kinds of young people, I interviewed about, I don't know, close to 60 people to find the 4 people who were in the film. In the end, I realized that it's often the artists and the activists who are willing to take the risks to push the boundaries. So it's not that the questions and concerns that they had are so different from so many other young people, but the willingness to step out there and be visible and to be willing to say things and do things that are often scary and dangerous and put you kind of at the line of a fire. For example, in the case of both Miman and Tanya, who come out as undocumented, and Roma, who are the only ones in their families who are able to do that. So that's how I kind of slowly over the years of searching, because it took a few years to find the people who were going to be in the film, realize like, oh, I'm really looking for those people who are pushing those boundaries in that way. And the funny thing is, I think so many filmmakers are also, and artists in general, are making work that relates to their own experience. And I became an activist as a young person. At about 14 years old, I became an activist. And then I deepened my art practice. I had always been an artist. So in a way, I was looking for my peers. I was looking for people who also spoke to the kind of work that I was doing. And but you don't always realize that when you start, how much things are reflective of your own internal sensibilities and passions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You asked about the 20s to 30s. I didn't answer that part of it. Yeah, I mean, I think the questions around identity and belonging are questions that really begin very young in our lives. And I think by the time we're teenagers, they're often very, very pressing. So I imagine some people who are in the audience are really confronting those questions in their own life right now. But I think often it's around when you're in your 20s where you start to take steps for yourself to articulate things publicly for others, and come into yourself in a certain way. Out of your family's house or out in the world, you have an opportunity to experiment, to try things out, and to sort of really solidify things. So yeah, that's why. And also because when I started this film, I was in my early 20s, and by the time I finished, I was in my mid 30s. So there's something about, also this is a film about my peers. It's a film about a generation that I feel a part of. And yeah, so that's the other question. Yeah, other reason. Mm-hmm.
And so you said that you were like an activist like really early. So for you, what brings filmmaking to your activity as a militant? What brings it more? And do you see your films as yourself as an activist filmmaker?
So yes, I do see myself as an activist, and still in my filmmaking. And it's not just in the finished work. I think it's in the way I work and the way I collaborate and the way I work with the communities who are featured in the film and the protagonists who are featured in the film. So it's a lot about the process and really valuing and holding certain values in the making of the film that are treating everyone involved as if they have value, as if they are part of transforming society, as if we need to respect each other. And I say that because there is a real, unfortunately, a colonial tradition in documentary film that is a lot about extracting stories, interesting stories from interesting people, kind of parachuting in and then jumping out and never really having a relationship to those people before or after, not really being accountable to how the film might impact their lives afterwards. So some of it can be very simple, just really being responsible in the way that you make film, you know, as an artist. And I think that can be true for any field, that we can be really think about our work and the way we work as part of our political and like social justice work, whether we are working full time as quote unquote activists, right? But also I think that culture often leads political change, and narratives are part of what make reality. And so if we want to make new realities possible, we have to tell stories that allow those new realities to come into view. And we need stories that give voice to realities that aren't often visible in the mainstream. So for me, and create a public will and a yearning for change. So if we don't have stories that allow us to imagine what's possible, to make us want something better, we will very often continue to perpetuate systems that are not actually serving us. So yeah, I see myself as in that way also as an activist in making films that I hope do both of those things, like challenge the way we think about migration, the way we think about belonging, think about race and racism. And then I also see myself connected to these movements that are both featured in the film and some things that are not featured in the film. I will show up at those rallies and go participate as a member, not only as a documentarian. And for me, it's important to have that role as well and to be able to continue to learn and participate and put my body in the, on the line in the same way as I'm also documenting. So I feel like a participant as well as someone who's, sometimes stepping out to see things with a little bit more perspective as a filmmaker.
From Here isn't just a film, but it's also a whole education initiative around it. And I was wondering, how did that start? Why didn't you want just to make a film, but to have all these interesting things around it?
Yeah, I should say making a film is pretty challenging. So it would have been enough to try to make a film. For any of you who are interested in making films, don't feel like you have to do 20 other things at the same time. It takes a lot of concentration and attention. But because I had a background also in organizing, in community organizing, and I think I just organically approached the process that way. And part of it came from the fact that I was working in Germany, which is not where I'm from. And so I really had to humble myself to really being willing to learn and listen from people who are German of all backgrounds. And first of all, see if the ideas that I was bringing really resonate and were relevant in a German context, or if it was just me imposing my idea of what was going from the outside. But also obviously navigating, there was a lot to navigate in German. Both, I basically learned German through making the film. So my speaking isn't great, but my comprehension is pretty good because I also edited the film. And Yeah, so essentially what happened is I started collaborating with people, and because my background was also in visual art, not just film, I think I had the attitude of, you know, form follows function. And if the concept can be adapted for in different forms to meet different sort of goals or purposes, then it's completely flexible. So we ended up making a short film, and I was in New York at the time, and John, on who you're going to meet during the Q&A, she was going to London, and for a master's degree, she wasn't going to be in Berlin. And we said, oh, we need someone to go screen these films in schools or other places. We're getting invitations to show this short film. And once we put out the invitation, if there's anyone who wanted to do screenings with us, suddenly there were like 7 people who didn't just want to do screenings, they wanted to do workshops. And I guess the point is that we were adaptive, and it wasn't that the plan from the beginning was to do this massive project, but it grew out of the desire of the collaborators, the invitations we were getting, the request to partner we were getting, the people who joined who had their own visions to add to my initial vision, and the kind of vision grew. And because my commitment to the questions and the issues in the film is much bigger than just one project, it's a lifelong commitment, I was, you know, really grateful to be able to continue to explore it in all these ways. So we did installations, we did live events, we did workshops, we've done a lot of different things, and we're continuing now to do that kind of work and let it evolve. I mean, I guess I should say as well, a film is one way to open a conversation, but there's a lot of different ways, and the ideas in the film, there's a lot more you can explore beyond 90 minutes. So we did do the historical timeline of With Wings and Roots, in part because there's not space in this personal documentary to go into a lot of historical context. We really wanted people to be able to be with the protagonists and experience their reality and their, you know, their voices. But the history is really important. The context really makes a difference. And so to have a resource ready for people after they've seen the film to really dig in deeper to how did these systems evolve to be the way they are? How did these laws evolve to regulate people's lives in these ways? So if you do end up watching the film and getting interested in some of how we got where we are, we do have these immigration histories for both Germany and the US, which was, you know, quite a lot of work. It didn't just happen accidentally, but really something we wanted to provide because there actually are pretty poor immigration histories available for the most part. Yeah.
And also the documentary is set in Berlin, in Germany, like you said. And why did you choose Germany, like Berlin? Is it for you maybe the most representative city for this question of immigration in Europe, or what was your idea?
Yeah, I think like always, there's a combination of the sort of theoretical reasons and then also the personal reasons. So I had been interested in what was happening with migration in Europe, in part because I spent some time living in Greece, where I also have family, and had some real interesting experiences, just sort of witnessing the anti-immigrant sentiment and xenophobia in Greece that was developing. Also, that was sort of being directed at me because people didn't believe that I was Greek American because of just whatever signals people assumed the way I dressed didn't seem American enough, whatever. So I had really been interested in what was happening with Europe. And I think that, you know, the US and Europe are together in sort of having crafted this legacy of white supremacy that has been spread around the world with colonialism. And what's happening with Europe and immigration and what's happening in the US are very much tied. So there's this idea of who really belongs, who really is a citizen, who really can participate fully, which has to do with these colonial ideas. So I was interested in how young people were navigating those boundaries of national, you know, the nation state, essentially, in both Europe and the US, what we could learn from what was happening in other parts of the world, how we could see our own context differently by stepping out of one place. And I think I could have chosen some other cities besides Berlin, but Berlin had a very, interesting, I mean, Germany is the biggest immigration country in Europe. It is a very powerful city, and compared to New York, it's also a very cultural city. So both of these are sort of cultural capitals in a lot of ways, where they do attract a lot of artists and people from around the world who are innovating and playing with these concepts of identity in their work in different ways. So there was a certain kind of parallel in terms of like these creative fertile grounds for people to really experiment, and also just these places being kind of hubs for migration. So yeah, I think we have work to do together, both people, in the US and Europe, to kind of fight systems that were built up in parallel and really are protecting the same thing in many ways, which is the vestiges of sort of racial capitalism, I would say. But also migration, forced migration is happening all over the world at unprecedented speeds. And so we could have also looked at cities that were not in Europe or the US and seen how young people are navigating those same questions of belonging and citizenship and identity there. It's not only a European or US issue, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I had a lot of other questions, but I think we have actually. No, it was great. It was so interesting, and everything was really clear, and it was really great to hear your talk about your film. It was really interesting.
I'm really happy that the film is also getting shown to young people. I became activist as a young person, and I think that young people's voice and power is often underestimated, and people talked about as if your future potential, as opposed to like the power right now. And if you notice, the people in the film, they are all, I mean, they're a little older than you all, in the audience, but they're all young people themselves who are leading these movements for change. And I think that our societies really are in need of dramatic change, and it's young people who are going to lead it. So I just want to let you know that I think your voice, especially in these issues around really fighting for democracies that are multicultural, multiracial, plural, however you want to describe them, it's essential. And that's the fight that's happening in the US right now. That's the fight that's happening in many countries in Europe right now. And it's young people who are going to offer the pathway that it's really possible to really have new visions of how our societies can actually value everyone who's part of them, and not be based on the exclusion of so many. So I'm grateful that you're there, and I'm grateful for all the work you're going to do. I'm looking forward to hearing how it goes. I'm sorry that time zones are too different to participate, but I'm looking forward, and thanks for making the chance for me to speak.
Yes, thank you too.